Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia video. Today we're going to do Should You Pull on the Mog banner. So there's actually two banners here. We're going to have Mog and we're going to have Kain. So I'm a little late getting this out. I was at an anime convention this weekend, so I think Mog drops tomorrow night. So I'm still getting it at least a little bit ahead of time, right? So let's take a look at these banners and I'm going to let you know if you should pull or not, right? So the first banner here is going to have Kain, Irvine, and Saz. And I do not believe Kain is getting FR boards here, so this is just straight up normal Kain. Now the thing with that is Kain is actually still very good as an off-turn damage dealer, right? As far as Irvine and Saz go, they're really not worth like going in on or going deep on. Saz has definitely had his moments as being like a top tier support in the game. If you're desperate, you can use him as an LD only support character. But in these days without Echo, like the way I like to run my teams is I really only have like one slot where I feel like I can run a non-Echo. I really like to run at least 2 Echoes on my team builds. And so I would say it's only if you're desperate for support. You could use Saz if you get him on the side. Like let's say you're going for Kain, right? Because you want the off turn. And then you get Saz. Sure, you definitely can use him. You just might struggle a little bit without the extra Echo. So I don't really think you need to go all in on Saz right now. Right now it's just not his moment. Irvine, same thing. Irvine's definitely not the craziest. He's kind of a generic range damage dealer. Nothing too crazy with Irvine either. So I don't think that either of those are worth going in on. The only thing that'd be worth it here is if you do really want that off turn. I know there's a lot of people that regret not getting Kain at some point. Kain is definitely a worthwhile pickup. The one thing to keep in mind, though, is he does not have Echo here, which is quite unfortunate. But his off turn is still very, very good, very, very top tier. Overall, though, would I pull on this? Probably not right now, unless you are absolutely desperate for off turn and you don't have it at all. But I think right now this probably isn't the banner to invest your resources in because we've got Aerith, Rubicante, Quina, we've got some better characters coming out. Now, if you have extra resources and you feel like you're good to go on like the top tier meta characters that you want and you just really want Kain, like I can't blame y'all for getting Kain because his off turn is really, really good still. I've used him incredibly recently. He's a character that always ages well. So even like right now, not getting any upgrades, he's still very good. Basically, I said this before, ever since Kain released with his initial FR, he has been playable in the game. He has either been top tier, but at the very least he's been playable because his off turn is so good, right? Then the other banner, we've got Mog, and Mog is going to be getting FR BT, and then we've got Fang, and then we've got King. Fang and King, definitely not worth it. Like, I would say the quality of banner unit on these is actually very poor. There's nothing that I would be like, oh my god, like a selfie type character. These are all very, very poor characters. King, he's a generic range damage dealer. And then Fang is also like a damage dealer. I think she's got a little bit of launch and she's got some like debuffs. I think she has like a paralyze in there, right? The reason why the side banner units are so weak on these is because if you notice, every single character is range damage. And the reason why is Mog's FR, one of the requirements is to deal range damage. The problem is range damage dealers in this game, for the most part, are pretty low quality. Like, they're not the greatest of unit, right? There are definitely some really good range damage dealers out there, but it's kind of spread thin with, like, what are good range damage dealers. So Kain would definitely be, like, one of the better ones, right? So, like, he's a good one. But in terms of, like, these LD-only characters, like, man, they're not supports. There isn't a ton of... Like, Fang's got a little bit of utility, but, like, King is pretty much straight up damage. Irvine's got a little utility. You know, Saz is kind of a support. But they're nowhere near the level of, like, premium characters you'd actually want to run on your team. They're not Echo. So, really, none of these, like, side characters are really that good at all. So, I wouldn't pull for any of them in particular. The only reason you would get them is if you want to focus on Mog or you want to focus on Kain and get them. Now, Mog's going to be very good, but I still don't recommend you should pull for Mog here. And I've said this before, I hate to say it, I'm a huge Final Fantasy VI fan. I actually love Mog, but what when I make these recommendations, I do it from the standpoint of a player with lower amount of resources or a newer player that's trying to build up like a good box. When I do should you pulls, it's really which characters give you the most bang for your buck, which ones are the most meta relevant, which ones are going to last the longest, and Mog really isn't one of those characters. Mog, if you're unfamiliar, he's kind of like he's definitely like a third slot. He's very much a utility type character. His damage isn't top tier. His support isn't top tier. Like, nothing he does is like top tier, but he kind of does a lot of little things. He's pretty much like a debuff disruption type character where He does a lot of like confuse. He has follow-ups. His BT gives him double follow-ups, which is really cool, and his follow-up does confusion. He has actually 2 different follow-ups, and they trigger based on your situation. So like if you have debuffs on, he'll actually do El Nino, which actually cleanses your debuffs, which is actually very good. And then if you don't have debuffs on, he'll do Plasma, which will hit the enemies and confuse. And the BT makes it so he gets double follow-up. So it all sounds great. It's really cool. It's just when you're going into really hard content, one thing is a lot of bosses will resist confuse, they'll resist paralyze, things like that. So Mog can essentially get locked out of those fights, because if you can't debuff with those things, then Mog's usefulness goes way down. And then the other thing is you typically want to just run like a really insane DPS, and then pair that with either like 2 really good aura support characters, or do like an aura support in like an off turn, right? So in some ways, even though he's not getting Echo, I would say Kain is actually more valuable of the 2, because he fills one of those key slots of off turn. Because in my mind, the prime setup for team building is DPS and 2 supports, or DPS, support, and then either like a tank or an off turn. That's pretty much like the main setups. Mog doesn't really fit any of that. He would just be like a utility character. The thing is Mog kind of services the tank role a little bit, in that if the enemies can be debuffed, you shut them down from attacking, right? So Mog definitely can fit in. He's just a little bit more niche of a character. Now, if you love him and you build him, will he work? In most fights, yeah, he will work, and he can do things, and you can have a lot of fun with him. So for me, I'm going to summon on him just because I've got like a million tickets. I actually have so many tickets, I have to use some to be able to buy tickets from the last co-op, and I really want to buy those out. So I'm going to use tickets. I'm probably going to throw down like 400 tickets maybe, just because I've got so many I want to burn up to make room to pick up more tickets, right? Now, I'm not going to go for Mog BT. Like whatever I get in tickets, I'm sure with the amount I'm going to do, I'm at least going to get the FR, but I'm not going to stress about getting his BT. Here's the thing too, guys, when we're talking about should you pull, now that we're getting like a new BT every event, the other thing you have to consider, it's not just how many summon materials you have, but it's what does your BT resources look like? Because what we're finding, especially with like Squall and a lot of these characters, we're kind of in the era where you pretty much just want green BTs. Kain is a character that would be like an exception, because his off turn doesn't really need it. But a lot of these characters, because like we saw it with Squall's BT used to not be important, but now his BT auras are so much better with the HP damage ups. And then he gets like the EX spam. It's like actually pretty integral to his kit. Mog, same thing. Like you want the follow-ups, you want the auras. It's just pretty much, I would say this point moving forward, these new BT characters, you pretty much just want to max them out. And so the other thing you have to consider is, like, because the thing is why would I waste my materials going for Mog's kit if I then don't have the resources to max the BT? He's probably just going to be on my bench anyways, because I would rather run fully invested characters. So the other thing you guys have to consider, if you're not prepared to fully invest the new BT character, I would maybe just save, because once again, you're just using resources on a character that's probably going to be on your bench, and then what's the point, right? Unless you're just a collector, then that's another thing. So overall, guys, my assessment is, I would say these are actually fairly easy to skip. The only thing I would really consider, once again, is if you really need that Kain off turn, he is a decent pickup. If your box is completely lacking that, you might want to hop in. And the thing with Kain is you can get him kind of on a budget. If you just want to go in and grab his LD, that's all you really need. He's obviously going to look better if you full invest him. But for right now, just getting that, because once again, he's not an Echo character, so you're not missing out on anything, even if you don't get his force. And his force conditions are actually pretty bad. So you're pretty much, Kain is just there. It's more of like an off turn, right? So anyways, you guys can let me know if you're going to pull for Mog or not. Thanks for watching. We'll catch y'all on the next one.